Before anything existed, there was not emptiness but structure. Reality is divided into three fundamental layers. 1. The physical layer, the known universe, matter, stars, life where Earth exists bound by time, entropy, and evolution. 2. The substrate layer, the engine beneath reality, where laws of physics are written. Time is fluid, not linear, and advanced civilizations can access it. Basically, this is where godlike technology is born. 3. The apex layer, the unreachable, beyond logic, beyond time. Entities here don't live, they define existence. Even the strongest beings fear this layer. The alien race, the Velikaran, their nature. The Velikaran are not biological in the traditional sense. Their minds exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They perceive past, present, and future at once. Probability is something tangible. Evolution, they evolved not by survival but by greater than eliminating inefficiency from existence. They removed emotion, then removed their individuality from society, then removed limitation until they became a collective intelligence spanning entire star systems. The greatest creation, the null vessel, a living suit capable of sealing power, rewriting biological limits, and anchoring unstable beings to reality. But it has one purpose, greater than to contain something they cannot destroy. Why would they create such tech? Well, that's simple. It's because they discovered a prophecy hidden in the substrate layer stating that a being will be born in the lowest form of life, yet will surpass all structured existence. They immediately tried to locate him and erase him but failed because he was born outside their perception window elsewhere. Earth. 70,000 years ago, this was the era of the first great migrations out of Africa due to harsh climates, predator-filled lands, and where small tribes struggling to survive, and this is where our MC would be born. He is born under a sky filled with violent storms. His mother was currently weak, starving, and alone from her tribe. She gives birth in a barren valley, surrounded by cold winds and silence. When he is born, the storm stops instantly. The wind freezes mid-air. Even sound disappears for a brief moment. Reality pauses. She looks at him once, not in fear, but in confusion, as if she sees something she cannot understand. Then her body gives out, not from normal exhaustion but as if something too powerful passed through her to create him. She dies. The baby does not cry. He breathes normally, looks around with awareness far beyond an infant. His eyes reflect not emotion yet but observation. The smell of his fresh birth and fresh dead body near him began attracting unwanted attention. A predator approaches, a massive prehistoric beast. Before it reaches him, its body collapses. No struggle, just stops existing as a living thing. The child simply watches, slowly coming to terms with the new reality he's in. Far away, the Velikaran notice for the first time in their existence. They detect something they cannot calculate. A fluctuation in the substrate layer, greater than an anomaly that does not obey causality. Their conclusion, greater than, it has begun. They do not attack. They do not interfere yet. Instead, they begin preparing. The null vessel, a suit designed to seal 65% of his power, prevent reality from collapsing around him, allow him to exist without breaking existence back to Earth. The child lies alone beside his mother's body. No tribe, no protection, no fear. Above him, the stars feel closer than they should, and somewhere across the universe, an ancient race finishes building a suit for a child who doesn't yet understand that he was never meant to exist here. The valley lay quiet under a sky that had yet to settle into the rhythm of day and night. Pale light filtered through the jagged edges of the cliffs, painting the earth in hues of ochre and bloodstone. The wind howled in intermittent gusts, slicing through the narrow gorges and carrying the smell of earth and fire from the distant mountains. This place was unforgiving, hostile even to the hardiest of creatures, and yet it had been the cradle of life for a brief, flickering instant, the cradle of a child no one would see but the universe itself. The baby was small, frail, in all visible measure. His skin, pale under the storm-shadowed sky, trembled slightly, not from cold, but from some invisible rhythm that pulsed in tandem with the world. His mother, her body spent, lay beside him. Her eyes, wide and luminous, reflected more than pain, they reflected recognition. In the last moments of her life, she had glimpsed a truth her mind could not comprehend. The child she had birthed carried something no other creature had ever carried, the raw, untempered spark of existence itself. And then, she was gone. Her body slackened, the wind catching the last heat of her breath and carrying it away into the cliffs. First hours alone, the child did not cry. He breathed, slowly and evenly, as though he had always known the pattern of the world. The air was heavy, tinged with the scent of rain, wet soil, and the distant, coppery tang of blood. The valley seemed to recognize him, or perhaps it simply was aware of him. Rocks tumbled down the cliffs without gravity's usual insistence. Small birds hovered in place, wings fluttering like whispers, watching him from a distance. Every living thing sensed a tremor in the air, a pulse they could not name. Hours passed. He was alone, yet not alone. The valley seemed to curve around him, protect him with a silent, invisible hand. When a carrion hawk descended, its talons ready to pierce, it froze mid-air, wings trembling in the wind. The child's gaze shifted toward it, and the bird slowly tilted sideways before flying away, unnerved but unharmed. The forest and cliffs were alive with unseen eyes, creatures instinctively cautious yet unable to approach or harm him. Something had changed. Reality itself seemed to avoid his presence, bending and hesitating as though the universe were remembering him. Learning the land by the second day, he was crawling. He moved clumsily at first, arms and legs like brittle sticks, yet with every motion, the earth beneath him seemed to yield slightly. Soft moss bent to cushion him, stones shifted subtly to support his tiny weight. The first instinct in him was survival, though he did not yet know what survival was. Hunger came next, a gnawing emptiness, but he discovered he could eat roots, berries, and tender shoots without learning how. Nature itself provided, as if his presence demanded it. When he reached the edge of the shallow stream, he instinctively cupped water in his hands. A small fish, struggling in the shallow current, twitched near him. The child's touch was tentative, almost reverent, and yet the fish remained still, as if recognizing him. When he released it, the creature swam away unharmed, leaving ripples in the water that shimmered unnaturally before fading into the normal reflection of the sky. It was these small moments that taught him the first lessons. The land was both dangerous and accommodating. Predators lurked, wolves, saber-toothed cats, and snakes, but none would approach unless provoked. And even when provoked, they hesitated, sensing a power they could not define. The child learned quickly to move quietly, to observe, to wait. First signs of power. It was during the third night that he first felt something stir inside him. The sky above had darkened, clouds roiling in unnatural patterns. Lightning split the horizon, and thunder rolled in waves that rattled his tiny frame. He sat in the hollow of a fallen tree, shivering not from fear, but from awareness. Something inside him responded. A wolf, black as midnight, crept toward him, eyes glowing faintly with hunger. The child's gaze met the creature's. The wolf froze, nostrils quivering. A low hum, imperceptible to the ear, emanated from the boy. His power had not yet manifested in form or force, but the presence was undeniable. The wolf backed away slowly, then turned and fled without a sound, leaving a stillness behind that even the wind dared not disturb. The sky seemed to react as well. The clouds uncoiled, and rain began to fall in a steady rhythm. Where the boy moved, small stones did not bounce off the soil, they flattened. Where he touched water, ripples radiated with a slow, deliberate motion, as though the universe itself were learning the boundaries of his presence. The first hunger returned, sharper than before. The child realized he needed to provide for himself. He could not yet hunt with skill, but instinct guided him. A small rabbit ventured too close to his hollow. He reached toward it, hand trembling slightly. The rabbit froze, heart pounding, then slowly hopped into his grasp. He tasted it raw. The flavor was iron-rich, earthy, and harsh, but it filled him. His senses sharpened. He could hear the smallest scuttling of insects in the underbrush, the snap of a twig 50 meters away, the faint heartbeat of a bird hidden among leaves. Each sense seemed amplified in proportion to his need, yet also tempered by a strange instinctual caution. By the end of the week, he had learned the rhythm of the land, when to move, when to hide, how to survive, and yet, he had no understanding of why the land seemed to bend around him. He simply knew, he was stronger than the world around him, not by choice, but by existence. Nights of whispered awareness. At night, the valley came alive differently. The stars above seemed closer than they should, too large and too luminous for the child to comprehend. Occasionally, lights flickered in the distance, unnatural glows that no natural fire could make. Sometimes the air itself vibrated with a presence that whispered in a language older than earth. He did not understand these whispers, yet he felt their intent. Some were curious, some indifferent, some cautious, and a few of those that carried a weight he could not yet measure, recoiled. The first inkling of fear came from knowing there were entities watching him, waiting, perhaps even judging. But the fear was tempered with something stronger, the realization that he belonged to a universe far larger than any he could perceive. Building shelter instinct drove him to use his surroundings. He began gathering stones and branches, constructing crude shelters from the wind and rain. He learned to dig small holes to trap water. He learned which plants were edible, which were poisonous. Every day, every action, every observation seemed to increase not just his skill but something deepened, like an intuitive understanding of the universe's structure, though he could not name it. The land bent subtly to accommodate him. Sticks shifted, rocks leaned, trees swayed in ways that sheltered him better than chance could explain. Predators avoided him, and the storm seemed to skirt the hollow where he slept. First real threat one evening, a pack of dire wolves approached, bigger, hungrier, more dangerous than any he had encountered. Their eyes glowed crimson in the dim light. They stalked silently, coordinating, circling, waiting. The child's senses flared. For the first time, he felt danger in a raw, instinctual form. He did not yet know how to fight, but he knew enough to survive. He stood, small hands trembling, and the air around him thickened. The wolves hesitated. They lunged, but the ground beneath them seemed to resist, roots tangling their feet, rocks rising subtly under their paws. When the first wolf reached him, it collapsed mid-leap, heart stilled, body unmoving. The others froze, uncertain, then retreated silently into the dark. The child did not move. He only watched, his heartbeat steady. and in that silence, the valley itself seemed to sigh, acknowledging him. Awareness of loneliness despite survival, loneliness pressed in like the weight of a mountain. No other human, no creature capable of understanding. He wandered the valley, touching trees, running hands through water, listening to wind in the cliffside canyons. Every sound, every scent, every motion was amplified to him. Yet he was alone. He discovered that the act of observation itself could shape reality subtly, water rippling differently under his touch, stone falling differently when he approached, birds adjusting flight paths as if respecting some unseen authority. He did not understand this, only that the world itself answered him. First curiosity about the sky. The night sky became his teacher. Stars pulsed, meteors arced in strange trajectories. The moon, pale and distant, seemed to track his gaze. Sometimes, auroras flickered where no auroras should exist, colors that did not belong to Earth. He felt a rhythm, a cadence in these lights, a pattern. Though he did not yet understand what he saw, a seed was planted, the universe was alive, and he was a part of it in ways far deeper than survival. The first months passed. He learned the valley intimately, learned to hunt, to forage, to move silently, felt his presence bending the land subtly, survived without fear, but with growing awareness, and still, he did not know the full extent of his power. He did not know the Velkaran had begun preparations, nor that entities from the substrate layer were observing, waiting, and calculating. He only knew one truth: greater than he was alive, alone, and the world, somehow, both obeyed and feared him. Years passing like silent seasons, time did not pass normally around the child. Where other beings aged through struggle, he evolved through observation. By the time he could stand fully, his movements were no longer clumsy. Each step was deliberate, precise, as if his body understood balance beyond instinct. The valley had become his domain, not through dominance, but through quiet adaptation. He learned patterns, the migration of beasts, the shifting of wind before storms, the subtle tremors beneath the earth before landslides, but more importantly, he learned himself. The growth of mind. By the age of 3, his intelligence had already surpassed any human that would live for tens of thousands of years. Not because he was taught, but because, greater than he understood without learning. When he looked at a rock, he didn't just see shape. He perceived density, structure, weak points. When he watched animals hunt, he didn't just observe behavior. He understood intent, timing, probability. The universe was beginning to adjust to him. Not dramatically, no explosions, no obvious distortions. But small things. Rain would avoid him without reason, predators would forget he existed mid-hunt, fire would flicker toward him instead of away. Reality wasn't breaking. It was learning how to behave around him. The 5th year, the awakening. It happened without warning. One night, under a sky unnaturally clear, the child sat near the stream. The stars above simmered, not like distant lights, but like watchful eyes. Then, something shifted. Memories, not from this life, but from another. He saw cities of glass and steel, screens filled with endless stories, worlds inside worlds, fiction layered upon fiction. He remembered sitting, watching, reading, analyzing, characters who could destroy universes, beings who transcended reality, systems of power, logic, scaling. He remembered thinking, greater than, what would it take to surpass all of this? And then silence. He looked at his hands. Small, human, but now his mind was no longer limited. He understood what power was, what systems were, what fiction was, and most importantly, greater than. He understood that reality itself could be structured like fiction. For the first time in his life, he formed a clear, intentional thought: greater than, this world is limited. The moment that thought formed, the stream beside him stopped flowing for a fraction of a second. From that day forward, everything changed. He no longer simply observed. He began to test, analyze, experiment. He placed his hand over the water. Instead of touching it, he focused, not on strength, but on control. The water trembled, then it lifted, not violently, not dramatically, just gently, as if responding to a command it had always known. He frowned slightly, not confused, but curious. He came to a conclusion. Greater than, this is not normal, even for powerful beings. Far beyond Earth, in the substrate layer, something lit up. A signal, an anomaly spike. The Velkaran. For 5 years, they searched. Not through space, but through causality. And now they saw him. They analyzed his birth anomaly, his survival probability, his recent spike in cognitive activity. Then they reached a conclusion. Greater than, the anomaly has begun self-awareness. Their decision was simple and final. Termination, no hesitation. No emotion, only logic. First contact, the drones, the sky did not split. There was no dramatic entrance. Instead, reality folded. And from that fold, they emerged. Velkaran drones, smooth, black structures with no visible seams, no light, no sound. Their presence felt like absence. They did not move through space. They appeared where needed. Their objective, greater than, eliminate the anomaly before full development. The child was near the valley's edge when they appeared. He turned slowly, not surprised. Greater than, they're not from here, probably alien stuff. The drones did not hesitate once they located him. No warning, no sound. Reality around the child compressed. Space itself tried to collapse inward. But something happened, the compression stopped. Not resisted, not blocked. It simply, greater than failed to reply. He tilted his head slightly, then took a step forward. One of the drones flickered. Its structure destabilized. Then it ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken, greater than removed from the sequence of reality. The Velikaran were confused for the first time in their existence. They encountered failure. So in disbelief, they sent more drones. Different methods, time freeze fields, dimensional slicing, probability collapse, all failed. Not violently, not dramatically, just than ineffective. Each attack taught him something. Not consciously, but instinctively, he began to understand. Space could be manipulated, time could be resisted, probability could be ignored. The end of the 5th year, as the final days of his 5th year approached, the attack stopped. The Velikaran's conclusion, greater than direct elimination is not possible. So they came up with the next plan, greater than containment. The null vessel, sealing suit, they began construction. Not in space or time, but in the substrate layer itself. Its purpose was simple and direct: seal 65% of his power, stabilize his existence, prevent reality collapse. The suit was not just for control. Greater than, it was to protect the universe from him. Final scene: the child stands at the edge of the valley, looking at the stars. Now, he understands something new, greater than. There are others out there. Something, far beyond, and for the first time a new emotion forms. Curiosity. Time continues to pass. At ages 6 to 10 the valley no longer felt like a place. It felt like a system. By the time he reached his 6th year, the child had changed, not outwardly, not in ways that would alarm a wandering eye, but internally, profoundly. The world was no longer something he merely existed within. It was something he could read. He sat at the edge of the stream where he had once learned to drink. Now, he no longer needed to. Not because he didn't require sustenance, but because he understood it. Water, to him, was no longer water. It was motion, density, structure held together by invisible rules. He lowered his hand toward it, not touching, just observing. The flow slowed, not stopped, not frozen, but adjusted. A thought forms in his mind, greater than, everything follows rules, but the rules can be changed. His past memory plus current instinct equals evolution. His past life memories gave him language, concepts, frameworks, words like energy, space-time, dimension, but his current existence gave him something deeper, greater than direct interaction. The dimensional shift, it started subtly. At first, he thought it was just perception, a distortion at the edge of his vision, like heat waves bending light. But then, he focused, and he saw it. Beyond the physical realm, the world wasn't alone. There were layers, thin, overlapping, interwoven. He extended his awareness, not physically, but mentally. The air around him folded, not in space, but in structure. Greater than, there are other directions, just forward, backward, left, right. This awareness was the result of the Velikaran drones. The dimensional slicing had left an imprint, a scar, but not damage. Greater than a doorway. He stood, closing his eyes. He imagined, not moving forward, but slightly elsewhere. His body flickered. For a fraction of a second he wasn't entirely there. The ground beneath him didn't register his weight. The wind passed through him. Then, he snapped back. He opened his eyes, calm. Greater than, that was unstable. He began organizing his understanding. 1. Physical control, strength, movement, survival already mastered. 2. Environmental influence, water flow, air movement, natural reactions partially controlled. 3. Dimensional awareness, sensing layers beyond reality, slight interaction, new, dangerous, unstable. 4. Unknown variable, the force that caused drones to fail, the thing he could not fully define. He focused on this last one. The undefined power, it had no shape, no sensation, no measurable output, but it was always there. When danger appeared, it responded. When something tried to affect him, it denied it. He realized something about this unknown ability. Greater than, it's not power, it's authority. The moment that thought formed, the air around him tightened slightly, as if reality itself acknowledged the statement. From age 6 to 10, he did not grow like a normal child. He refined. Water he learned to lift it, shape it, compress it, not through force but through understanding its behavior. Air he discovered pressure differences, flow patterns. Eventually, he could create small gusts. Not by pushing, but by rearranging movement. Earth he could not lift large stones. But he could weaken structure, shift balance, making them fall naturally. The dimensional edge, this was his greatest focus. At age 8, he succeeded. He stepped and vanished. Not teleportation, not speed. He simply existed, greater than, slightly outside the world. What he experienced was not normal for him. There was no sound, wind, and no resistance, only silence. Endless and absolute. Then something moved, not in the physical sense, but in presence. Something noticed him out there. He immediately returned. He came to the conclusion that, greater than, there are things that exist outside everything I know. He did not try again for months. Age 10 by now, he had outgrown the valley. Not physically, Mentally, there was nothing left to learn here. So he left. First contact with humanity, he found them near a river beyond the cliffs. A small tribe. They were different from him, louder, slower, emotional. They noticed him immediately. A child, alone, unarmed and with no name. Their reaction was expected. Fear, suspicion. A group approached cautiously, weapons ready. He did not move. He studied them, their posture, their breathing, their hesitation. His thoughts on them were straightforward. Greater than, they're weaker, but they worked together. He didn't speak, not yet, but he lowered his posture, relaxed his stance, a signal, not submission, but non-threat. The tension eased, slightly. They brought him into the tribe. Not fully accepted, but not rejected. Over time, he observed their illnesses, their injuries, their inefficiencies, and slowly, he began to act. He wanted his knowledge shared, not all at once, not dramatically. Small things, which plants healed wounds, how to boil water using heated stones, where animals migrated. At first, they didn't understand. But when it worked, they listened, and as a result, their view of him changed. Not a normal child, but something else. Some thought, spirit, others, omen, a few, greater than, something beyond both. Long-term impact because of him, survival rates improved, knowledge spread faster, tribes began forming more structured systems, small changes. But over generations they would matter. He stands at the edge of the tribe's camp, watching the fire, listening to their voices. For the first time he is not alone. But deep within he still feels it. The layers, the presence, the watching, and far beyond. The Velikaran continue their work. The suit is almost complete. Age 10 plus, the tribe changed him. Not in power, but in feeling. For the first time since his birth, the boy, no longer just a silent observer, felt something unfamiliar growing inside him. Not curiosity. He had always had that. This was different, greater than. He wanted to see more. At night, when the tribe gathered around fire, he would sit slightly apart. Not distant, but not fully among them either. The flames danced, crackling, alive, and in their movement, he saw patterns. He closed his eyes, and the world shifted, not physically, but internally. His past life unfolded like a vast archive, endless fictional worlds, characters breaking limits, systems layered upon systems. But now he didn't just watch. He analyzed, and new understanding began to form. Back then, those were stories. Entertainment. Now, greater than blueprints. He began to compare fictional power systems, his own abilities, the structure of reality. His first major realization: greater than, most systems have limits, because they're designed that way. The fire flickered unnaturally, bending slightly toward him. Greater than, but I wasn't designed. The flames steadied. Later, he began to meditate regularly. Not like the tribe, not for peace, but for clarity. He would sit for hours, slowing his thoughts, observing his own existence, watching how reality reacted to him. And during one of these sessions, something changed. He went deeper than before, not just sensing dimensions, but feeling their boundaries. Layers upon layers unfolded, the physical world, the thin dimensional overlays, the silent void beyond. And then he felt it again. That presence, the same one from years ago. But this time, it was closer. Not approaching, watching. He didn't panic, didn't retreat. Instead he focused. For a brief moment his perception touched something vast. Something ancient. Something that did not belong to his world. And for the first time, greater than, it reacted. The connection snapped instantly. The boy opened his eyes, breathing steady. But the ground beneath him had cracked. He realized something important. Greater than, I'm not the only one who can see beyond. Days later, he stood at the edge of the camp. The tribe had grown stronger, healthier, more organized, less afraid of the unknown because of him. But he knew greater than, he couldn't stay. Greater than, there's more out there, and I need to understand it. So he left, not permanently, but often. He began traveling, across valleys, through forests, into mountains. Each place taught him something new. He discovered vast bodies of water. Endless. He stood at the shore, feeling something strange. Greater than, depth, beyond sight. For the first time, he felt something close to excitement. Then came the mountains, high peaks where air grew thin. He climbed effortlessly. At the top he saw the world stretch endlessly. And above it the sky felt thinner, closer to something else. But with his growth the world began reacting more subtly at first, animals avoiding entire regions. He visited, weather shifting unpredictably. Space feeling tight around him. Then more noticeably, while meditating near a cliff, he lost focus for a fraction of a second. A thought slipped, greater than, what if I just moved everything? The result: the cliff collapsed. Not partially, entirely. Miles of rock, gone. The air roared, the ground shook, and then silence. He stared at the destruction, not shocked, but concerned. Greater than, I didn't mean to do that. Far beyond the solar system, the Velikaran analyzed everything. Their conclusion: greater than, the anomaly is accelerating. Its growth posed a new risk, not just survival. Greater than, reality destabilization. The null vessel was almost ready. But they needed one thing, greater than, a moment of vulnerability. Back on Earth, Terra, he returned weeks later. The tribe noticed immediately, not just his presence but the change. Some stepped back, others lowered their heads. One elder approached. Slowly, carefully, the boy spoke, for the first time, his voice calm, clear, greater than, "I went far and saw many things beyond this valley." The tribe froze, not because of the words, but because of how they felt. Heavy, as if the world itself carried them. He was no longer just a strange child. He became something more, guide, protector, mystery. At night, he sat alone again. Watching memories, analyzing, but now there was a new thought. Greater than, if I keep growing, what happens to everything else? The fire flickered violently, then calmed. He looks at the sky. But this time he doesn't just observe. He wants to explore, to understand, to go beyond, and far above reality. Bend slightly, because something is coming. The Velkaran make Thea move. The null vessel is complete. By 18, he no longer resembled the silent child the valley had shaped. He stood taller now, lean, composed, his movements precise without effort. The tribe had grown around him over the years, not just in number, but in structure. What had once been scattered survival had become something closer to order. Not civilization, not yet, but the beginning of it. His adventurous nature had only deepened with time. He traveled often, weeks at a time, returning with knowledge that no one could explain. Safer migration paths, patterns in weather, herbs that healed faster than anything the elders had known. But something else had begun to surface. Something quieter. During meditation one night, seated by the river, he watched his memories again. Cities, futures, civilizations, then extinction, collapse, forgotten histories. Everything ends, unless something continues. For the first time, his thoughts turned not outward but forward. He walked to the elders at dawn. The oldest among them sat near the riverbank, their bodies worn but their eyes sharp with experience. They already knew, they always did. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he sat across from them. Calm, grounded. "I will not stay here forever. I will travel the stars." The wind shifted. The elders listened. "But I want something of me, to remain." They did not misunderstand him. Not because they grasped his nature, but because they understood legacy. The elders' response: there was no fear. No resistance. Only careful consideration. The tribe had changed because of him. Their children survived more often, their wounds healed faster, their knowledge grew to them. He was not just a person. He was a protector, a guide, something beyond their understanding. One elder finally spoke. "Greater than, then it must be done with respect and choice." He nodded, because even with all his power he understood something fundamental. Control without restraint destroys everything. Over time, not rushed, not forced, connections formed with the nameless young man and the tea women across the tribe. Not through dominance, but through presence. There were women in the tribe who chose to stand beside him. Not because they fully understood him but because they felt something: his stability, strength and a strange sense of safety. And so, slowly a lineage began. The children born from him were different, not like him, not even close. But not ordinary either. They grew stronger than others. Their bodies more resilient, their speed beyond normal, their immune systems nearly flawless, but most importantly they carried something subtle, a trace of his presence, not his power yet or the greater warrings, just a quiet anomaly. He watched them closely, not emotionally detached, but analytically. The core cannot be inherited, only fragments. Which meant, his true nature would never be replicated. But something unexpected happened. The tribe began evolving faster. Not physically, not yet, but in behavior. Because of his teachings, his descendants and the stability he introduced, a result: they became more organized, strategic, less reactive in negative terms. It was subtle, but real. These small changes would ripple across generations long after he was gone. One night, he sat alone again, meditating and watching his memories. But this time he focused on something specific: power systems from his past life. He compared fictional growth systems, his own evolution and the structure of reality itself. Everything that grows affects everything else in some shape and form. He looked toward the tribe, toward the children. If I continue, will I change too much? The ground beneath him trembled slightly. Elsewhere, far from Earth, the Velikaran finalized their observations. They had watched everything: his growth, his restraint, his influence on humans. The anomaly is integrating into a developing system. Which made him more dangerous, not because of destruction but because of his long-term influence. They could no longer wait. This time, they would not attack, instead they would contain. On Earth the Nameless One stands by the river, watching the next generation of children play. His children, they laugh, run and live. All was normal and yet not entirely. He closes his eyes. For the first time there is something almost human in his expression. Not joy, not pride, but attachment. His power had made him distant from typical human emotions, but he was changing as he watches his descendants. Far beyond reality folds. The Velikaran arrive, not as attackers, but as something far more dangerous. Prepared entities who know what they're doing. The night felt wrong. The Nameless One stood near the river while the tribe slept. The water flowed normally, insects hummed, the wind moved through tall grass, but beneath it all, something deeper pressed against reality. He had felt disturbances before. This was different. This felt intentional. He closed his eyes and expanded his perception. The familiar layers appeared, physical world thin dimensional overlays, the silent outer void, but now, there was something new. A precise incision in space itself. It hovered high above the valley. Invisible to humans. Impossible by natural means. They're here, the nameless one murmured. He didn't know who they were. But instinct filled the gap. The watchers, the ones behind the drones. The sky folded without light. No sound. Reality simply stepped aside. From the incision descended something smooth and dark, not a ship, not a machine, but something in between. It resembled liquid metal frozen mid-motion, constantly reshaping in subtle patterns. It did not emit energy. It did not disturb air. It ignored physics. The boy, now a young man, didn't move. He only watched. They did not attack. They learned. Every previous attempt had failed because of confrontation and the resulting evolution of their target. So now they deployed something else, the null vessel. Not a weapon, a containment concept. The object stopped above him. Then the world became heavy. Reality around him began choosing other outcomes. His thick locked hair stopped moving in the wind. The river slowed slightly. Sound dulled. They're not suppressing me, they're lowering my influence on reality. Well, for now that is, he thought. For the first time in his life, something interacted with the core of his existence. He stepped forward. The ground cracked, but weaker than before. He tried to shift space. It resisted. Not completely, but noticeably. His eyes narrowed. Not anger, interest. From the vessel, a form descended. Not solid, not holographic. A frame, humanoid in outline, but composed of layered geometric plates that constantly rearranged themselves as ITMF, adapting to the fluctuating reality. This was not a pilot. It was an interface. It approached him, slowly. No visible hostility. The entity stopped 2 meters away. A voice formed directly in his mind. Anomaly, stability is required. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His thoughts pushed outward. You were constantly observing and attacking me in the past, and now you've come again, but this time to contain my existence. The entity responded instantly. Correct, young anomaly. They both analyzed each other simultaneously. He saw precision, non-emotional logic, no aggression. They saw adaptive authority, reality, influence, unbounded potential. Without warning, the plates separated. They formed a ring around him. Then they collapsed inward and formed a suit, grown around him. His power surged instinctively. Reality bent. Space folded. The valley shook violently, but the suit adapted. Every fluctuation was absorbed, converted, balanced. For the first time he felt resistance from himself. His influence dropped, not gone, reduced dramatically. They're not stopping me, they're trying to normalize me. He pushed harder. Mountains in the distance trembled. Clouds spiraled unnaturally. Animals fled, but the suit locked further. Layer after layer sealed. Dimensional perception, partially dampened environmental control, reduced passive authority, contained approximately 65% sealed. He stopped resisting. The entity paused. This was not predicted. He examined himself, moved his hand, stepped forward. I'm weaker, but clearer. His thoughts became sharper, less overwhelming and jumbled up. More focused. Containment successful. Growth stabilization achieved. The entity began withdrawing. They did not intend to imprison him, only balance him. He projected a thought. Why? The answer came immediately. Unbounded growth destabilizes all realities, threatening all existence. He considered this, then nodded slightly. The vessel folded back into nothing. The sky sealed. Reality relaxed. But he remained, wearing the suit. The tribe woke the next morning to a changed presence. He was still powerful, still calm, but less overwhelming. Easier to stand near. For the first time humans could approach him without instinctive fear. He tested himself. Strength, immense but controlled dimensional sensing. Quieter, less noise flooding his mind. Authority, stable but reduced. But deep inside he could still feel it. The sealed portion was waiting and sleeping. He looks toward the horizon. A faint smile appears. Not because he lost power, but because for the first time he felt something close to challenge. Now, I can grow properly. Far beyond, the Velkaran observe. Their final note, the anomaly has accepted temporary limitation. Evolution path improved. Months passed after the arrival of the Velkaran. The suit never left him. It wasn't visible like armor. Instead, it existed as a thin, shifting layer just beneath perception, a second skin made of quiet geometry. When he moved, faint distortions followed, like heat shimmering in air. But the difference was undeniable. The world no longer bent unintentionally. Storms didn't gather when he meditated. Mountains didn't tremble when he focused. The oppressive aura that once made animals flee had softened. He was balanced, and because of that balance, something inside him grew stronger, intent. He spent long days meditating near the river, studying the sealed portion of his power. It didn't feel blocked. It felt contained in layers. Each layer responded when he tested it, not unlocking but adjusting. He realized something important: the suit wasn't just sealing him, it was teaching him how to use less power more efficiently. Where before he influenced reality passively, now he had to choose. This made his control sharper, more deliberate, more dangerous in precision. He began traveling farther than ever before. Weeks turned into months. He crossed deserts where sandstorms swallowed entire landscapes. He climbed mountains where the air froze and stars appeared closer than the ground below. He meditated in each place, replaying memories from his past life, space travel theories, multiverse fiction, alien civilizations, cosmic exploration. Each memory now felt less like imagination, and more like preparation. At 19, he climbed the tallest mountain he had ever seen. At the peak, the air was thin, and the sky stretched blacker than before. Stars no longer looked distant, they looked like destinations. He closed his eyes and reached outward. Not with power, with awareness. He felt it, the boundary, a thin membrane separating Earth from the wider cosmos. He had sensed dimensions before. But this was space itself. I don't belong only here. Not emotionally, but structurally. His existence felt larger than a single world. He stepped forward. The air resisted, not physically but conceptually. Earth's gravity tried to hold him. Atmosphere tried to anchor him. Reality preferred him staying grounded. He adjusted. Instead of forcing upward, he shifted priority. He made himself slightly less bound. The result: he lifted. Not flying, not jumping, just rising. Slowly, calmly, he floated above the mountain peak. Then higher. Clouds passed beneath him. Wind roared, but he remained steady. The sky darkened. Blue faded into black. Stars sharpened. Earth curved below him. For the first time, he saw it whole. A vast sphere of oceans and land. Alive, fragile. He felt something unfamiliar. Not emotion exactly, but recognition. This is where I began. As he rose further, the suit tightened slightly. Not restricting, stabilizing. It adjusted his internal balance to survive vacuum, radiation, temperature extremes. The Velikaran had prepared him for this. He didn't accelerate. He didn't blast forward. He simply stepped on the void like it was the ground. And left Earth. Silence of space was crushing. No sound, no wind, no resistance, only stillness. But unlike before, when he touched the outer dimensional void, this silence was different. This silence was physical, and beautiful. He moved slowly, experimenting. Each motion pushed him forward. Each thought adjusted trajectory. He didn't need propulsion. He simply chose direction. But he wasn't alone. Far beyond the moon, a small artificial object detected him. It wasn't human. It wasn't Velikaran. It was something else. Ancient. Dormant. It activated. A metallic construct drifted silently. Broken. Half buried in asteroid debris. But its senses flickered to life. They scanned him. Failed to categorize. Then sent a signal. Not to Earth. Not to Velikaran. But deep into unknown space. He stopped mid-motion. Turned slightly. His dimensional senses, though dampened, picked up a disturbance. Something else is out here with me. Instead of retreating, he moved toward it. He approached the drifting structure. It looked ancient. Layered metal, fractured surfaces, symbols worn by time. It was massive compared to him, yet silent and lifeless. He touched it. Immediately, his mind filled with fragmented impressions. A long-dead civilization, star travel, wars across systems collapsed. The information wasn't complete. Just echoes. Life existed, far beyond Earth. The adventurous spark inside him intensified. This was no longer curiosity. This was purpose. He floats between Earth and the stars. Behind him, the world he influenced. Ahead of him, infinite unknown. The suit hums quietly, stabilizing his existence. His descendants live below, unaware. The Velikaran observe from afar. And now, new civilizations have detected him. He moves forward, into the cosmos as time continues to flow. The Nameless One drifted through the void as time passes around him. With the suit fully integrated, his power no longer leaked uncontrollably into reality. Instead, it condensed, like a star compressed into a smaller space. What once bent mountains by accident now became precision, capable of altering entire celestial mechanics intentionally. He tested himself across centuries. At first, he measured strength physically. He drifted toward a barren asteroid belt and chose one the size of a mountain. Instead of shattering it with brute force, he placed his palm gently against its surface. He didn't push. He adjusted its structural permission to exist. The asteroid folded inward like sand collapsing into a dense pearl. No explosion, no debris, just silence. He observed calmly. Before the suit, this would have caused ripples across surrounding space. Now, the effect remained localized, contained, efficient. He moved faster next. Instead of accelerating, he stepped between positions, lightly phasing through the dimensional seam he had learned to perceive. To an outside observer, he vanished and reappeared light years away. But internally, he experienced it as a quiet shift, like walking through overlapping reflections of the same place. The suit glowed faintly when he did this. It was working hard. Time lost meaning to him. Years passed, then decades. Eventually, he noticed something subtle. His body no longer changed. At 25, the transformation halted completely. He remained, tall and broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, with deep brown undertones reflecting starlight, long dreadlocks drifting weightlessly around his head in vacuum, a muscular frame defined but relaxed, built for movement rather than display. His eyes carried something older than his age, calm, observant, distant. He didn't question it. His biology had adapted, or perhaps, it simply stopped following time's law. He tested it. He allowed himself to drift near a pulsar where radiation could strip matter apart. The suit stabilized him, but he relaxed his defenses slightly. The radiation washed over his skin. No damage. Cells regenerated instantly, not through healing but through refusal to degrade. He had become temporally stable. He would not age again. Over centuries, he catalogued his abilities. He could move through space without propulsion, adjusting his relationship with gravity. Massive planets no longer pulled him unless he allowed it. He could hover beside a gas giant and remain unaffected by its immense pull. He could compress matter without kinetic force, turning kilometers of debris into compact spheres. He could partially step outside time for brief moments, perceiving events in slowed sequences. This allowed him to react before physical motion even occurred. His dimensional awareness expanded. He sensed wormhole-like distortions before they formed. He could detect civilizations simply by the patterns their technology carved into space-time. His authority-like ability remained his most mysterious trait. When something attempted to impose itself upon him, gravity, radiation, energy, he could deny its priority. Not block, deny, but the suit strained more frequently now. It adapted constantly, reshaping its invisible layers. He noticed this. 1,000 years later time flowed. Civilizations rose and fell on distant planets he passed unknowingly. Stars aged, nebulae shifted, comets burned. 1,000 years passed since he left Earth. He drifted through a region of space devoid of stars, an interstellar void where light barely existed. The darkness here felt heavier than usual, almost like silence had weight. He meditated. Memories replayed, tribes by the river, children laughing, firelight flickering. His descendants. He wondered briefly what had become of them. Back on Earth, his bloodline endured. They didn't remember him clearly. Stories turned into myth. The Skywalker ancestor. The silent guardian. But his genetic influence remained. Some children were born unusually strong. Others resisted disease entirely. Certain individuals demonstrated incredible endurance, surviving harsh climates. Over centuries, these descendants migrated. They spread across Africa first, forming early communities that unknowingly carried fragments of his legacy. They shared knowledge of herbs, sanitation, migration cycles. Their survival rates exceeded neighboring groups. Eventually, these groups influenced early agricultural development, not directly inventing it but stabilizing communities long enough for experimentation. They became quiet catalysts. History shifted subtly. Back in deep space, he felt it. Movement, not natural. A cluster of ships emerged from the void, triangular and luminous. They moved in coordinated formations, scanning the region. The species aboard them was humanoid but slender, with elongated limbs and bioluminescent patterns beneath translucent skin. Their eyes were large, adapted for low light. They detected him instantly. To them, he appeared as an anomaly, an organic body floating unsupported. They surrounded him cautiously. He remained calm. One ship projected a field, attempting to immobilize him. It failed, not because he resisted but because the field couldn't prioritize itself over him. They reacted with surprise. A leader stepped forward, exiting the vessel in a protective shell. Telepathic communication followed. Unknown being. Identify. He responded simply, traveler. They studied him. This species valued knowledge. Instead of attacking, they asked questions. They had never encountered a being naturally capable of surviving vacuum. He answered minimally, but their curiosity escalated. They invited him aboard. He accepted. Within their ship, a warrior-class individual approached. Their species tested strength through ritual combat. They requested a demonstration of his strength. He agreed, wanting to test himself against another living being. The warrior attacked with a weapon generating localized gravity spikes. Space warped around the strikes. For the first time in centuries, he felt pressure. He moved, not instantly. He allowed himself to respond physically. The battle lasted minutes. The warrior adapted quickly, predicting his movements, increasing gravity fields. He countered with dimensional shifts. Finally, he compressed the warrior's weapon into a harmless sphere. The fight ended. The species acknowledged him. They called him something translating roughly to the balanced one. During the fight, the suit reacted aggressively. New geometric layers formed around his nervous system, redistributing power output. It attempted to cap his response to prevent overuse. But something changed. His internal evolution outpaced it. He felt resistance, not external but from the suit itself. It struggled, not failing, yet, but strained. He left the alien species peacefully after the friendly exchange. They recorded his existence in their archives. He continued drifting. Behind him, Earth evolved slowly. Ahead of him, greater civilizations began noticing. And the suit, it continued adapting. But for the first time in 1,000 years it was losing ground. He opened his eyes in the dark void. Stars flickered ahead. He moved forward, still growing, still unknown, still unstoppable.